Hi again. Now we're going to start to study some of the larger forms. And today, so in other words, we've talked about the small forms of binary forms. And we've also, of course, talked about phrase structure like sentence and period. So now we're going to go to the next level in terms of form and talk about the larger forms. Starting with ternary form, which I think you'll agree is probably the simplest of all the forms, very easy to grasp. Very easy concept in general. So I'll be talking about two types of ternary forms, but they all kind of follow the same basic principle. All right, so let's get to some background for this. Ternary form, as the name implies, is a three-part form with three self-contained sections, and it goes by the paradigm A, B, A. So simple enough. Now, here are some important aspects that are going to distinguish it from binary form, particularly rounded binary form that's sometimes confused with it. Each section is going to be harmonically closed, at least in general. Each section is going to be kind of set off from the other sections. And it's not only going to be harmonically closed, but it's going to have its own distinct thematic material. The A sections in the ABA form are going to be in the tonic key, while the B section will be in some contrasting key. So A sections, tonic key, B section, some other key. Here, though, it's perfectly fine if the B section is just in the parallel mode, but there's going to be some contrasting key. If the A section is in C major, we can at least be assured that the B section will not be in C major. It could be in C minor, but not C major. Now, besides that, now let's take a look at this little diagram here. It's really simple. So we have, A, B, A. The A section is in the tonic key, B section in some non-tonic key, so I just put X because we can't predict that, and then A back in the tonic. All right. Now, the only thing that might complicate this in any way would be the presence of transitions or retransitions. These are optional, but they do sometimes occur to avoid the sections being too separate from each other, from it being too sectional, maybe to produce a more flowing effect. So the difference between a transition and a retransition is simply where it's leading. A transition, if it does occur at all, would occur at the end of the A section and would lead usually to the 5 chord of whatever the new key is going to be. So there are usually some sort of arrival on the 5 chord before you get to the new key. Then a retransition, conversely, if it does happen, will happen at the end of the B section, and it will naturally land on the 5 chord and then lead us back to the tonic key. Now, in terms of the repertoire, I think you'll find many more retransitions than you do transitions in ternary forms. Retransitions are much more of a marker of the style, but really you could also have one that doesn't a ternary form that doesn't have any of these. It just kind of moves in block form from A to B to A. All right, now that we talked about the basic, now that's the most basic one. Let's do a little analysis now. On the next 2 pages, you're going to find a piece by Brahms. So this is page 2 and 3. Take those out. What I want you to do is give me just a basic diagram of the piece, showing the key areas, the measure numbers where the start of sections happens, as well as be on the lookout to see if there's any transitions or retransitions. Put those in your diagram as well, where those begin. You will encounter some of them here. Now, the score does not include the whole piece. You'll find all you need, though. There's going to be a gap after measure 19, and then you're going to pick back up around measure 37. Should be easy for you to find that as you're listening, though. And now, so why don't you go ahead and pause the video and find a recording of this piece, because I'm not allowed to play full pieces here. So find a recording, give it a listen, and then come back and I'll show you my diagram for this piece. Okay, now that you had a chance to look at this, now this makes it look a little more complicated than it really was. The A section was all in the key of F major. We're giving that the Roman numeral 1 here. The B section was in the key of D major. Now look at this crazy Roman numeral put here, 6 sharp, because if you think about it, it's a chromatic third related key, isn't it? So you have basically the key of D major, F major to D major, so D major will be 6 sharp since that's not a diatonic chord in F major. And then back to the A section, all in the tonic key. So that will begin at 1, 17, and 48. Now, in addition to that, we did have some short transitions and retransitions here. The transition happened around measure 15. So right here, we had the tonic chord in F major, and then we get this 2-measure pattern where we modulate into the key of D major, ending with the 5 chord right here. And then that leads us smoothly over here. And like I said, some pieces don't have that. But then when you get to measure 45, so here we're all in the B section. This is going along in the key of D major. We end here in D major, and then, yes, we have 3 measures right here of retransition. You'll notice this kind of gradual thing where we lead to the 5 chord in the key of F with this, well, kind of weird note hanging over here. We're kind of added 6th to the chord. And it's as simple as that. I mean, right, ternary form is about as basic as it comes. There's really nothing too complicated about it. These works tend to happen, though, and then I guess you find them most commonly in these 19th century character pieces, maybe as slow movements. They often are very interesting on the surface. They have a lot of interesting surface harmony. The form, though, is very, very straightforward. All right, so that's your basic unadorned ternary form. Now let's talk about one other possibility for ternary form. This is what's known as compound ternary form. Anytime you see the word compound, that means there's a smaller form kind of laid within the larger forms or the larger sections of the form. So compound ternary form contains smaller forms within the larger A form. So in other words, the A section would have a small form, the B section might have a small form, and then of course the A section again would have a small form. We usually encounter this in the classical minuet and trio movement, where the minuet is the A, the trio is B, and the minuet da capo is A. Then each larger section is often constructed as a binary form, usually a rounded binary. So this is what I've shown you here. This is just sort of an imaginary diagram of a compound ternary form. A minuet, B trio, then A minuet da capo. So if they just write da capo, that's just implied to be a repeat of the beginning. Again, A and B would be in different keys, but the thing that makes this unique is that the A section itself might be a rounded binary form. So underneath this, I didn't put the key areas because as we know, binary forms have different options. Like the first section might have the modulation or it might not. So that's what you need to look at when you're diagramming this later. So the A might be a rounded binary, the B might be a rounded binary, and so on and so forth. Of course, there are some pieces that are a mixture between the non-compound ternary and the compound ternary. So yeah, right, the only thing that's unique about this one is the smaller forms contained in the larger ones. Pretty much anytime you get a minuet trio form, that's what's going to be happening. It's going to be this compound ternary form. All right, so what I want you to do now is I've given you another piece by this one by Beethoven on the next 2 pages. And same deal, I want you to give me a diagram. And you don't need to diagram the minuet da capo, since that's just going to be a repeat. But give me a detailed diagram of both the minuet and the trio. Kind of like in this format, have the larger keys above it, and then below it, do the detailed diagramming of the binary form. So go ahead now, pause the video and find a recording of this piece and give it a listen. Then we'll take a look at my answers. All right, so I'll just show you a little bit at a time here. So looking at the larger form, minuet was in F minor, began and ended in F minor. Trio was in F major, so just change mode. And then there was a da capo at the ending. So again, you don't need to diagram the da capo. It's just a repeat of the minuet. Now, as we can see, the minuet had the typical modulation for a minor key example. So this is a rounded binary, A, small b, A. B, again, here is the digression. Again, common modulation from F minor to A flat major, so 1 to 3. Then the B, the digression ends with the 5 chord, that half cadence, and then we get the A back. Now, you probably notice as you're listening, Beethoven does some interesting things to make this hard to, makes the recap a little bit less clear than usual. But nevertheless, the first section, F minor to A flat major, that's 1 to 3. Then we have a digression that ends with a 5 chord in the main key. Then we get the recap right here. See this little figure right here? Again, Beethoven does vary things more than is usual, but then we're back at F major. All right, then the trio, F is in F major. So again, we change the mode over here, and it has the standard modulation of a major one. It goes from 1 to 5, so F major to C major. Then we have a digression that lands on the 5 chord, and then we get the recap again, which of course, something's gonna have to be changed here so that we don't have the modulation. So if we're looking over here, first part goes from F major to C major, so 1 to 5 in terms of a modulation. Then you have a digression phrase that continues for a while until right here. Here's where we land on the 5 chord at the end of the digression. Then we get the recap and ending with the PAC in F major. So when diagramming these compound ternary pieces, you have several levels that you need to represent in your diagrams. And use this as a model for the homework. This is essentially what I want you to do. The piece for the homework is going to be, I'll give you a little warning, it's got a little bit of a mixture between these two options. In other words, we looked at the ternary form that was not compound, and then we looked at one that was. The one for homework is going to be a little bit of a mixture between the two, so be on the lookout for that. There's also some other interesting harmonic features that I think you'll enjoy.